appreciate you holding this hearing, the title of which is IRS. Is it ready? I think there's a very clear answer to that. And the answer is no, it's not ready. In fact, as we speak, the IRS is seeking to hire an additional 10,000 people just to get through this tax season, to put to bed so much that is out hanging for so many of the American people. And as the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times both report, the IRS is having a hard time competing with other employers. And quite frankly, that's not surprising when the job description for these 10,000 or so people is to enter millions of numbers and letters into a computer. So how is it that an organization which spends billions of dollars every year on information technology end up in this kind of position? In our recent hearing on program integrity, we heard how COVID, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, we saw how COVID exposed inherent weaknesses in federal fraud prevention capabilities. And this situation now, quite frankly, is no different. The IRS may have gotten by with their paper-based system before, but the challenges and complexities that are associated with the pandemic brought all of that to a crumbling halt. I, for example, and I'm sure many of my colleagues have heard from constituents who are absolutely at their wits' end. They've not gotten their tax refunds, and they need that money. They depend upon those funds. They cannot apply for COVID relief because they're unable to get the required documentation from the IRS. They cannot even get someone from the IRS to answer the phones, for crying out loud. If they use the where's my refund or where's my amended return tools, they get what in essence technologically would be a shrugged shoulder. The IRS says all of this is because they did not receive the type of funding that they need. And unfortunately, in my opinion, my Democratic colleagues are all too willing to go along with this mindset. And they point to 2020 as during the Obama administration, when the Democrats had both sides of Congress, they hold 2020 as the benchmark for IRS funding. Well, of course they do. The IRS is a soulmate with the Democratic Party, as evidenced by what has already been referred to moments ago as a $80 billion request that was in Build Back Better. But look, more funding alone is far, far, far too simplistic of an answer. And it assumes that all that money would be spent properly from the IRS, and that just throwing more money at the IRS somehow is going to solve all the problems. But how can anyone possibly come to that kind of conclusion? Just for example, the IRS is a home of the individual master file, IMF. This is the backbone of what the IRS uses. And the IMF has the distinction of being the oldest system in the federal government. And the effort to replace IMF, the customer account data engine, started in 1999 to replace this. The IMF goes back to the 1960s. In 1999, the attempt to replace it got under the way, and that attempt failed. So now we're in CADE 2, transition state number 2. A key milestone for CADE 2 was delayed for 9 years. And by the way, it's running 4 times the cost that was estimated. And so, and now the IRS are saying that the best that we can expect is that they'll have a transition new system by 2030, 8 years away. And even then, it's not going to be a full replacement of IMF. Look, this is high profile, but this is yet another example of the IRS's absolutely poor and unacceptable management of IT projects. This has been going on far, far, far too long, costing far, far too much money. And the IRS also has a reputation of hiding the ball, of not providing information until asked for, just as what's happening today, quite frankly. So no, absolutely no. Republicans are not willing to simply give the IRS more money on a long-term basis without any accountability. Proper oversight is what this committee is all about. And proper oversight is what is needed, is what is required for the IRS at this time. And how else can we possibly enable Congress to get to the answers that are needed with the poor management on multiple fronts that are taking place in the IRS? And most of the funding, by the way, in the Build Back Better plan, the $80 billion that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are requesting, is mandatory funding, which in itself reduces oversight. And so it seems that my Democratic friends just simply want to continue throwing money in a black hole that in itself has no oversight, and we will never see how that money is going to be spent to address the problems that are multiple at the IRS. And to the point Democrats like to raise about staffing levels at the 1974 levels, this frankly only further illustrates my point. The purpose of IT projects is to increase efficiency, is it not? I mean, that's why we're trying to develop new technology, is to increase efficiency. And so are we saying, and are we somehow content to believe that after 50 years worth of technological advancements and untold billions and billions of dollars spent, that the IRS has gained absolutely no capacity to do more with fewer people? And so here we are again with the IRS asking for another 10,000 people to be hired. Where is the technology to help the entire agency become more efficient? Look, the IRS has one main mission, and that is the completion of tax filing season successfully. And can you really tell me that there was no risk assessment that flagged a system that is based on manual keystroking as a potential serious risk to the core mission? But that's what they're asking for now. 10,000 people to come in manually, type in numbers and letters and so forth. And it just seems like we have had a total waste of 50 years of trying to boost up and increase technological advances. Some of the funding that you receive should have been spent on scanning capabilities to address an obvious weakness. So it seems that there was no real risk assessment about stroking in numbers. Why don't we use some of the money to scan some of the information? And let me end by raising a second core responsibility of the IRS. And this is a major, major problem as well. And that is maintaining the trust of the American people. There is no agency, I believe, in the federal government that has the ability to impact lives for Americans as does the IRS. So let me remind everyone that since 2010, the Democrats' benchmark for IRS funding, since 2010, we have seen the Lois Lerner scandal, in which many, many conservative groups that were seeking tax exempt status were targeted. I would add that this is a perfect example of the federal employee that should be covered by Schedule F, which quite frankly, I'm personally trying to seek some legislation. But from 2010 to 2012, The IRS also spent $49 million on lavish conferences. And then there was the famous Star Trek themed training videos. This past June, we saw a leak of massive amounts of taxpayer information to the press, making possible a serious series of stories from ProPublica. And these stories focus on the tax filings of high-profile individuals, focusing on the ultra wealthy like Elon Musk and Warren Buffett. And the series of stories make the argument that these people are not paying enough to the federal government, even though much of their wealth is tied up in unrealized capital gain. It's very interesting, oddly enough, that the Biden administration has now proposed taxing unrealized capital gains. So it seems as though the ProPublica stories and the leak from the IRS now serve as a political agenda. Interesting, the timing of all of that. But we're also interested in who is not paying their fair share. If that is really an interest to all of us, then why don't we start that type of investigation with the person who says the buck stops with him, and that would be President Biden himself. An IRS whistleblower, not a leaker, a whistleblower, alleges that the president and the first lady owe $127,000 in back taxes. So I'm sure that my Democratic colleagues will join me in calling for a public investigation of their tax filings, just as they did with President Trump. And then there's Hunter Biden, who, as the New York Times reported, took out a loan to pay off more than $1 million in back taxes. How about Stacey Abrams here in my home state of Georgia? She wore her $50,000 tax debt like a badge of honor. And as for the ProPublica leak, this information is supposed to be held in the strictest of confidence. And while committee Republicans have written seeking information about all of this, we still have no idea whatsoever as to how this happened. We actually wrote Chairwoman Maloney asking for a hearing on this issue, but nothing has happened. We wrote to Commissioner Redding asking for detailed information, but to this day, we still don't have the answers that we sought. All of the examples that I've raised highlighted the need for close oversight over the IRS. Mr. Chairman, that is what is needed. And yet Democrats continue to think that the only solution is throw more money at the IRS with no accountability. I strongly reject that notion. And with that, and with the overall bird's eye view, I'm grateful for this hearing. Looking forward to asking questions, and hopefully we will get answers that to this point have been refused to be provided. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the